My name is Sarah Wallace. I was the math genius daughter in a family that only respected power. But when I tried to claim my own, I was punished for daring to want more. The day my father praised my childhood trophies while mocking the awards I truly cared about was the moment I knew I would never be seen unless I made them watch. Have you ever been praised just enough to keep you silent, but never enough to rise? Tell me where you're watching from in the comments. I want to know how far this story reaches. Now let me take you to the brunch that changed everything. It always started the same: Denver sunlight pouring through the stained glass window, my father's silver cufflinks catching the light as he carved his Sunday roast, and my mother stirring cream into her coffee like she was afraid it might shatter. That day was no different. Except it was. Because that day, I opened my mouth. "Remember when I won the Regional Literacy Award in high school?" I asked, keeping my tone light, conversational. My father, Harold Wallace, CEO of Wallace Logistics and a man whose silence could weaponize a room, smirked slightly. "You mean that essay contest?" He set his knife down, wiped his mouth with a napkin. "Cute, but we both know you were always good with numbers. That was your lane." I blinked, stunned, though I should have known better. He meant it as a compliment. To him, being good with numbers was utilitarian, useful, containable. "But I also loved writing," I said, trying again, knowing better and doing it anyway. "I won state that year. They published my piece in the student journal, remember?" His eyes narrowed. "Soft skills, Sarah, that's not what this family is built on." That did it. Not the dismissal, but the casual finality of it. My mother, June, didn't look up, just set down her spoon, ever the silent echo to his declarations. And in that moment, I felt 14 again when I tried to shift a decimal point on one of his spreadsheets and got sent to my room for tampering with serious work. "But it mattered to me," I whispered. My voice cracked, not from sadness but disbelief. "That's the problem," Harold said, carving his roast with the same precision he used to dissect dreams. "You think everything you do deserves a spotlight. You were just good with numbers, nothing more." The table went still. Even the old clock on the wall seemed to pause. I could feel the burn rising in my chest, rage, hurt, something unnameable. I glanced at my mother. She frowned faintly, eyes not meeting mine. "Let's not make this a thing, Sarah." Of course not. Never a thing. Not when I was 7 and redesigned the garden irrigation system and he called it adorable. Not when I created my first forecasting model at 13 and he filed it away like scrap. Not when I stayed up for 3 nights helping him rework a logistics proposal, only to hear him thank his assistant the next day. This wasn't new. But that morning, something shifted. I folded my napkin slowly, carefully, like I needed to hold onto something tangible. "Thanks for brunch," I said, my voice calmer than I felt. "I just wanted to share something I was proud of. Won't make that mistake again." He didn't respond. As I stood, I caught my reflection in the old family portrait hanging in the hallway, me at 11, standing between Harold and June, holding my math medal like it was a ticket to belonging. And I realized he never wanted me brilliant. He wanted me useful. That's when the plan began to form, quietly underneath the surface. I didn't know what shape it would take yet, but I knew this. I wouldn't sit at this table forever, waiting for recognition that would never come. Not anymore. The Wallace estate was vast, sculpted to suggest legacy. Every hedge trimmed with precision, every bloom selected for historical significance, as if our family lineage grew straight from colonial soil. But to me, it had always felt curated rather than lived in. A place where roses mattered more than people. I was 22 the day I tried again. We were back from brunch, the roast digested, the sting of my father's words still lingering like smoke on silk. He had gone to the garden with his tablet, reviewing shipping manifests beneath the trellis of climbing roses, as he often did when pretending to be off-duty. I followed with hesitation, barefoot on the stone path, cringing slightly when I heard the crunch of gravel under my step. He didn't look up. "Dad," I said, careful not to sound too eager. "I've been reading about predictive logistics models, how analytics can reduce margin loss in seasonal shipping. I was wondering..." Pause. Breathe. "If you'd walk me through how you decide which routes to scale during Q4. I've been trying to reverse engineer your firm's approach, but I'm hitting some gaps in the logic." He looked up then, brows knitted, not with interest but irritation. You've been doing what? I hesitated. Studying your past routing decisions, just as a case study. I thought maybe I could help. A silence fell, thick as molasses. He tapped his tablet once, then set it down on the bench beside him. I'm not running a classroom, Sarah, he said. And this isn't some puzzle for a hobbyist. I know that. I just thought if I learned the system from your perspective. My perspective, he cut in, standing now, is that you're not ready. The breath caught in my throat. I'm asking to learn. No, he said, louder now. You're asking to be let in, and you haven't earned that. You don't have the head for strategy. You're reactive, sensitive. He said the word like a curse. You think reading a few spreadsheets gives you insight. You think Wallace Logistics needs another armchair analyst. His voice was sharp enough to draw blood. I stepped back instinctively, my heart pounding in my ears. It's not about the spreadsheets, I said quietly. It's about wanting to matter to you in the way that matters to you. His jaw clenched. Don't turn this into emotion. Emotion has no place in business. You want to be useful. Learn to take a back seat without needing applause. With that, he picked up his tablet and walked past me, his cologne lingering long after his presence had vanished. I stayed in the garden, long enough for the sun to move behind the elm trees, casting long shadows on the hydrangeas. My mother found me there eventually. She wore her usual soft pastel cardigan and a cautious look, as if approaching a wounded animal she wasn't sure how to help. He's under stress, she said gently. The quarterly board review is next week. I didn't ask him for anything, I replied. Just a conversation. She gave a small shrug, her hands fiddling with her wedding band. You're lucky he even listens, Sarah. He didn't talk about work at all when I married him. Just be patient. Patience. As if that were a virtue exclusive to daughters. He only listens when I'm silent, I said. That's not the same as hearing me. She didn't answer. Just sat beside me on the bench, silent as if her presence could replace comfort. I wanted her to say something brave, something real, to say, you're right, that was unfair, to say, you're not wrong to want more. But all she said was, the roses are early this year. I looked at her, really looked at her, the way her hands curled in her lap, the way her eyes avoided mine. A woman who had learned to live in the quiet margins of someone else's ambition. And for the first time, I wondered if I would become her, or something else entirely. 2 years passed. By then, I had stopped trying to impress Harold Wallace, not because I had given up, but because I'd learned something crucial. Begging for recognition from a man who feared being outshined was like watering a dead tree. I still lived at home, still attended board dinners where my mother would smile and nudge me to let your father have the floor. I still received birthday cards signed Love, Dad, and Mom in my mother's handwriting. But I didn't stop learning. Behind closed doors, I was reading books on supply chain systems, auditing case studies, teaching myself everything his firm had never offered me. And then one morning, without warning, Harold slid an envelope across the breakfast table. I got you something, he said, like he was offering a favor to a distant relative. Inside, a company ID badge, my name in all caps. Sarah WLLAC. Department, Postal Services. Location, Warehouse B. I blinked. This is for invoicing, he said, not looking up from his coffee. There's a backlog, figured it'd be a good way to get your feet wet. In the warehouse. It's a start, he said with that tight smile that meant the discussion was closed. Better than nothing. And there it was. The favor disguised as an opportunity. A job offer soaked in insult. No interview. No role matching my qualifications. Just a place to tuck me away where I wouldn't threaten the image of Harold Wallace, self-made logistics king. My mother clapped gently. That's wonderful, Sarah. You'll get a feel for the family business. It was not a beginning. It was a broom closet with a title, but I smiled. Thank you, I said. Really? Because I knew better than to fight the first move on the chessboard. Warehouse B was the kind of place where hope went a nap. The ceilings leaked in spring. The air conditioner worked in patches. My desk, if you could call it that, was wedged between 2 metal cabinets that smelled faintly of ink and damp cardboard. The window didn't open. The door didn't fully close. I spent 8 hours a day stamping invoices, logging received shipments into outdated spreadsheets, and watching the clock tick through my 20s. None of my coworkers knew who I was beyond the name on my badge. They didn't know I was Harold Wallace's daughter. And I didn't correct them. I ate lunch alone. I listened more than I spoke. I answered emails with exact precision, and I watched. I watched how inventory was logged late, how shipments arrived with incomplete forms, how nobody noticed when discrepancies slipped through the cracks. It wasn't malice, it was mediocrity coded in routine. And in that quiet space, something clicked. If I wanted to change this company, I had to understand its foundation. Not just the numbers, but the people who moved them. The habits that turned into blind spots. The mistakes that were buried under "this is how we've always done it." Each day, I kept notes, created models, sketched risk maps in a personal file I named Granite, solid, sharp, unbreakable. And each evening, I walked past the loading docks, the humming trucks, the fluorescent-lit quiet of a place no one cared to elevate, and I made a quiet vow. You don't need a corner office to start a takeover. Sometimes all you need is the lowest rung, because from there, you can see every crack in the ladder. Thursday nights in Warehouse B had a rhythm, quiet, gritty, and full of corners where ambition could live undetected. It was after 8 p.m. and the overhead fluorescents buzzed like gnats. Everyone else had gone home, but I was still at my little desk, sorting through late supplier invoices and trying to make sense of the chaos left by a lazy day shift. I didn't mind the silence. I'd come to prefer it. It was in that stillness, buried in the fourth column of a weekly expense report, that I saw it, something that didn't fit. 2 nearly identical invoices, same vendor, same freight weight, same shipping date, but 2 different delivery destinations, one to our main hub in St. Louis, the other to a storage facility we hadn't used in over a year. The difference? A single digit in the zip code. A typo, maybe. I pulled up prior records, same vendor, same kind of error, multiple times. Going back months, I double-checked routing manifests, scanned supplier emails, and watched a picture start to form like a developing photograph. Over $180,000 had quietly leaked out of the company's shipping budget. Rerouted packages billed at premium carrier rates for reasons no one had questioned. Sloppy, maybe. Intentional, very possibly. And no one had noticed. My pulse raced as I compiled the data into a new spreadsheet. I logged timestamps, dates, internal approvals. Cross-referenced old vendor signatures. Every line added weight. And when I was done, I wrote a short memo, clear, analytical, and precise. I signed it, Report by S. Wallace. No emotion, just numbers. I attached it to an email and sent it directly to my father's corporate account. No CCs, no dramatic subject line, just the truth in a clean, cold format. Then I closed my laptop and walked out. The next morning, I showed up like it was any other day. But something in the air felt different. In the break room, people whispered about a vendor issue. In the hallway, a clipboard was snatched out of my hands by a supervisor who never spoke to me. At 11:27 a.m., my phone buzzed. "HR here, you've been reassigned," said a bored voice. "Junior Accounting Department, West Wing. Effective Monday, details will be emailed. Congratulations." Click, no meeting, no call from my father. No one asked me how I discovered the issue. I refreshed my inbox, nothing. But that afternoon, a press release from Wallace Logistics appeared on the company's internal newsletter. Wallace Logistics reduces Q2 risk exposure by 11% through strategic oversight, the headline read. I opened it slowly. There he was, Harold Wallace, shaking hands with an executive, standing in front of a whiteboard filled with mock analytics. The quote beside his photo made my stomach turn. "We're implementing smarter invoice controls and real-time audit strategies. Our leadership is always thinking 3 moves ahead." No mention of how this risk had been uncovered. No mention of the woman who sat in a windowless room for 3 weeks untangling a spiderweb no one else could see. Just silence. The worst kind of theft wasn't physical. It was the kind that stole your voice, your visibility, your right to be recognized for what you built with your own hands. And yet, I didn't cry. I packed up my desk that night in Warehouse B with a strange calm. I tucked the original report into my file-marked Granite, along with my personal notes on vulnerabilities in Harold's freight partnerships and my rough draft of what an optimized contract model could look like. I'd written it weeks ago, on a whim. Now it felt like armor. As I left the building, I passed the delivery bay doors and turned back for one last look. I'd made my first dent. They didn't know it yet, but I was the one who'd drawn blood. Let Harold keep the credit for now. Let him smile for cameras and act the genius in boardrooms. He hadn't elevated me. He just taught me how to work from the shadows. My new desk was larger. It even had a window, though it faced a parking lot where nothing ever moved. Junior accounting came with a passcode printer, access to archived contracts, and a muted beige cubicle that hummed with fluorescent regret. The title was better, but the silence, just as deafening. They didn't ask how I knew what I knew. They didn't ask for more insights, but I gave them anyway. Each night after work, I came home to the Wallace estate. Yes, I still lived there, though the word home felt increasingly borrowed, and opened my laptop. I dissected vendor contracts, reconstructed freight cost matrices, and designed risk evaluation heat maps. I signed nothing, labeled everything anonymous departmental analysis, and emailed it to my father's executive folder. I never got a response, but a week later I'd overhear him on a conference call using my exact language: cost efficiency silos, seasonal routing surge analysis, blind spot redundancy buffer. He spoke them like he'd invented them. At first I felt sick. Then something colder settled in: clarity. I wasn't invisible. I was indispensable, but only in secret. At dinners, June would beam as Harold regaled his friends about his latest strategies, how he'd anticipated the market drop in Q3 and restructured procurement flows ahead of the curve. The guests would murmur admiration. I'd swirl my water glass, uninvited to the conversation even as I watched my own slideshows, ones I'd built alone at midnight, appear on his office's big screen. "You must be so proud of him," someone would say to me. I'd smile. "He's brilliant," I'd say softly. "He always finds a way." One night, after Harold closed a deal that saved the company $2.1 million, thanks to a vendor shift I'd mapped in a side-by-side projection model I emailed, just in case, he raised a toast at the dinner table. "To clean data, clean decisions, and clean wins," he said, smug. Everyone laughed, even June. "And Sarah," he added as an afterthought, not quite looking at me. "Thanks for helping out." That was it, no specifics. No mention of the report or the hours or the deep dive into carrier comparisons, just helping out. I wanted to scream, or cry, or stand up and throw my napkin on the plate and say, "You helped build nothing, I did." Instead, I nodded. "Of course." Later that night, I sat in my room, staring at my laptop screen. A new folder blinked back at me. It was time to name the project I'd been building in secret: Granite Metrics. I registered a domain. Bought the cheapest LLC starter package I could find. Rewrote my earlier models in cleaned code. Scrubbed every trace of Wallace Logistics formatting from the spreadsheets. The next morning, I went to a thrift shop and bought 2 gently used laptops. They still had someone else's fingerprints on the keys. Perfect. I brought them back to a tiny loft I'd leased downtown using the savings I'd been hoarding from my meager salary. It had exposed brick, creaky floors, and one working radiator. It was also mine. That night, as Harold poured another glass of champagne to toast himself in front of investors, I was somewhere else entirely, surrounded by dust, wires, and the quiet spark of something real. I didn't need his table anymore. I was building my own. You know that moment when silence becomes strategy, when the pain of invisibility morphs into fuel. That was me, sitting cross-legged on the dusty floor of my downtown loft, watching my second-hand laptops boot up like they were lighting a fuse. I had no funding, no team, just a fire in my chest that wouldn't go out. Granite Metrics launched on a cold Tuesday morning, quietly, anonymously. No LinkedIn announcements, no family congratulations, just an email address, a spreadsheet, and a promise to myself. They will not know I did this until I don't need them anymore. I spent my days sorting numbers at Wallace Logistics and my nights building models that solved the problems they refused to see. Freight bottlenecks, cross-dock inefficiencies, payment leakages. I packaged it all into sleek, digestible reports and began cold emailing small logistics firms, offering my services at below-market rates. The first reply came from a family-owned distributor in Fort Collins. "We can't pay much," the email read, "but we've got a mess and no idea how to fix it." Perfect. I took the contract, then another, then one more. I hired an intern, Lena, a grad student with sharp eyes and sharper instincts. I couldn't pay her much, but she believed in what we were building. We sat on folding chairs, ate dinner from paper cartons, slept some nights on couch cushions because we lost track of time running simulations. And slowly, Granite Metrics became something more than an idea. 6 months in, we got our first investor meeting. Frank Delane, a retired tech entrepreneur turned angel investor. He ran late, walked in mid-presentation with a coffee stain on his sweater and eyes full of polite boredom, until I showed him the numbers. My predictive model shaved 8% off shipping costs for a client in 3 months. I showed him how we caught a hidden duplicate billing system that had cost a mid-size carrier over $600,000. Frank sat forward. "This isn't academic, this is surgical." "It's personal," I said. He invested on the spot. It wasn't a windfall, but it was enough. We upgraded our laptops, bought real chairs, built a website that didn't crash when someone clicked about. That's when I started watching Wallace Logistics stock and buying just a few shares at a time. Through a brokerage account under the name S. Greystone, a pseudonym born from my middle name and the material that now defined my future, granite. I timed it carefully, bought low, watched for dips after quarterly calls. I knew the company's rhythms, its patterns, its blind spots. I'd helped create them. It wasn't revenge. Not yet, it was reclamation. Every time Harold paraded my stolen insights on stage, I bought a little more of the company he refused to share with me. No one saw it coming. Why would they? In their minds, I was still stamping invoices or shuffling spreadsheets. Quiet, dutiful, grateful. What they didn't know was that I was no longer under their roof, no longer on their leash, no longer afraid. The more shares I bought, the less I flinched at dinner table barbs. "You still in accounting?" June would ask, as if I were a volunteer at a bake sale. "Still learning," I'd reply, smiling into my water glass. And I was, learning exactly how to hold a knife without letting anyone see the blade. By then, I knew how to spot the signs of one of my father's storms before it hit. The clipped tone. The door slammed harder than necessary. The sudden, unspoken chill that spread through the halls like a gas leak. Everyone braced for it, executives dodged meetings, assistants avoided eye contact. But this time the storm was headed straight for me. It was a Thursday, overcast, wind gnawing at the windows of the Wallace Logistics Tower as if trying to warn me what was coming. I was reviewing Q1 client retention trends when the email arrived. No subject line, just one sentence, my office. 9:00 a.m. I didn't blink. I just saved my file, closed the screen, and stood. I'd known this moment was coming for weeks. Still, I took the elevator slowly, watching the numbers climb with a calm that surprised even me. As I stepped into the executive floor, I could hear muffled conversations stopping. The way people stared, not with curiosity, but the tense sympathy you give a soldier headed to the front lines. Harold didn't greet me. He didn't look up right away either. Just stood behind his desk, arms folded, his watch glinting in the morning light. "Sit," he said flatly. I didn't. We stared at each other for a long moment, father and daughter, mentor and outcast, legacy and liability. "You've been busy," he said finally. "Always," I replied. "Don't play cute. I've seen the reports, the late nights, the side hustle." His voice had that edge now, the one that made junior staffers stumble over apologies. "You think I don't know what you're doing?" he snapped. "You've been building something, outside this company, and worse, you've been bleeding your best ideas out there instead of in here." I kept my expression neutral. "So you've been tracking me." "I've been protecting this business," he spat. "You've crossed a line." I could have defended myself, could have pointed out how my unpaid insights saved his Q2, how my reports were the reason Wallace Logistics hadn't lost 3 key contracts last fall. But it didn't matter. The narrative was already written. "You've been waiting to punish me," I said quietly. "Ever since you realized I don't need your approval anymore." His eyes flashed. That hit too close. "I've tolerated your experiments long enough," he said. "But this betrayal, disloyalty." "Disloyalty," I echoed. Because I wanted to grow without asking your permission. His voice sharpened. Because you forgot who made you. I exhaled slowly. There it was, the root of it, the invisible chain he'd tried to keep around my neck. He gave me a job to control me. He gave me silence to diminish me. And now that I'd chosen independence, he called it treason. I didn't flinch, just waited. He reached into a drawer and pulled out an envelope, slid it across the desk like a contract of exile. "You're done here," he said. "Effective immediately, clean out your things, leave your badge." He didn't offer a handshake. I didn't offer thanks. Instead, I picked up the envelope and held it in both hands. Cool. Lightweight. Insignificant. Then I looked him dead in the eyes. "You've spent your whole life trying to make this company your legacy," I said softly. "But legacies are earned, not enforced." His jaw twitched. "I built you a safety net you never even noticed," I continued. "And now you've cut the only line that's been holding you upright." He waved a hand. "Spare me the speeches. You want to be on your own. Congratulations, you're no longer our concern." "Our," I echoed, raising an eyebrow. He hesitated for half a second, just enough to tell me June had been part of this. Of course. I nodded slowly, then reached into my bag and pulled out my Wallace Logistics keycard. I placed it on his desk like a final offering. "You think you're cutting me loose," I said, turning to leave. "But really, you've just opened the door." I walked out without looking back. No one followed. No one stopped me. By the time I exited the building, the gray sky had cleared. The air was crisp, clean, buzzing with something almost electric. My phone vibrated. A notification from my brokerage account. New milestone reached, 4.2% ownership in Wallace Logistics. I stood on the sidewalk, envelope still in hand, and laughed quietly to myself. The kind of laugh that comes not from joy, but recognition. I was no longer under his roof. I was already halfway inside his boardroom. He just didn't know it yet. I didn't cry after he fired me. Not on the sidewalk. Not on the ride home. Not even that night, curled up in my loft with Lena tapping away at her laptop, blissfully unaware that I'd just been cut loose from the company my name was stitched into. The tears came 3 days later, when I sat down across from Dr. Bloom and said it out loud. "He finally did it," I whispered. "He let me go." Dr. Bloom didn't gasp or tilt her head in sympathy like most people might. She just nodded once and waited. It was a quiet office. Sunlight diffused through linen curtains, the sound of a small fountain bubbling somewhere in the corner. Books lined the shelves, mostly unread, mostly there to remind people like me that help had architecture. "I thought I'd be angry," I said, "or triumphant, but I just feel untethered." Dr. Bloom folded her hands. "Untethered from what?" I hesitated. "Their version of me." She said nothing, just waited, giving me space to listen to myself. "They built this narrative around me," I continued. "The daughter who's helpful, quiet, brilliant, but not too brilliant, just enough to make them look good, never enough to challenge the order. And now that you're not playing that part," I exhaled slowly, "I don't know who I am to them anymore. Maybe I never did." That's when the tears came, not sobbing, just slow, persistent, like something old was finally melting off my skin. I told her everything then. The reports, the startup, the silent share buying, the sting of being erased from victories I'd authored, the impossible ache of wanting to be seen by people who looked straight through me. Dr. Bloom didn't offer cliches. She just said, "So stop giving them your energy." It was so simple, and yet it cracked something open. That night I sat alone in the loft, flipping through the thick folder labeled Granite Metrics Holdings. All the Wallace Logistics shares I'd bought over the past year, quietly, strategically, anonymously. It was time. I logged into the account under S. Greystone, clicked sell, and watched the numbers dissolve, hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of shares vanishing in one calculated exhale. The system pinged. Stock values dropped by 7% in the first 2 hours. By morning, investor chatter had already begun online. "Unusual dump of Wallace stock from mid-level holders. What's going on?" Rumors of instability at the top, poor transparency around leadership. Within days, 2 partner companies paused negotiations. One canceled outright. And still, no one knew I'd lit the fuse. At a glance, it looked like the market had simply shifted. Like investor confidence had eroded due to economic noise. But I knew better. I wasn't just walking away anymore. I was peeling away the scaffolding Harold had propped his empire on. And the thing about scaffolding, Once one beam collapses, the others follow. Lena asked me that week if I wanted to celebrate. Celebrate what? I asked. You're free, she said. And you just shook your father's company with a single click. I didn't tell her what I felt, not yet, because freedom I was learning didn't come in one clean cut. It came in waves, in the silence after you break a chain and still hear the clink of metal in your dreams. But I nodded anyway. Yeah, let's get cake. We bought the cheapest one at the bakery on 14th, ate it with forks straight from the box. Neither of us mentioned Wallace Logistics, or the headlines, or the fact that Harold's empire had just developed its first visible crack. But I knew. He was about to come knocking. And this time, I'd answer the door as someone he wouldn't recognize. The flowers were yellow, not red, not white, yellow. The color of cautious apologies, hollow congratulations, or the kind of affection you give to someone you're not quite sure how to love. I saw them before I saw him. A bouquet of roses and lilies crinkled cellophane clinging to his hand like it didn't want to be there either. Harold Wallace, standing in the middle of granite metrics, looking painfully out of place. My team froze. Lena leaned in from her desk. Is that? I nodded once. My father, she blinked. Should I? No, I said. He won't stay long. He wore his usual navy blazer, but it hung looser now. His face, less color, more crease. The kind of aging that doesn't come from time, but from watching everything you built start to wobble. I walked out from my office slowly. Dad, I said, voice even. He turned at the sound of it. For a second, I saw relief in his eyes, then something else. Hesitation, calculation, old habits dying slowly. I thought we could talk, he said. I didn't invite him into my office, just nodded toward the break room. We sat at the tiny round table where Lena and I usually split sandwiches and strategy lists. Today, it held a vase of half-dead daisies and Harold's trembling ego. He cleared his throat. You've probably heard. Things are a little rocky right now. Some investors pulled out, I said lightly. Contracts dropped, confidence shaken, I noticed. He nodded slowly as if agreeing with a weather forecast he didn't quite believe. I've been thinking, he said. We need someone with your talent, someone who understands the inside and outside. I blinked. Are you offering me a job? He had the nerve to smile. A partnership, we could fix this together just like old times. There it was, just like old times. The phrase dangled between us, a ghost wrapped in gold. I stared at him for a long moment. No apology, I asked. No acknowledgement of what you did, how you dismissed me, discredited me, cut me out. His smile faltered. I'm trying to move forward. That's convenient, I said, because for years you lived off the things I quietly built and called them your own. You want to skip the reckoning and get straight to the reunion. His lips thinned. Sarah, we're family. I leaned back. You're right, I said. We are. And that's why I know you're not really here for me. You're here because your ship is taking on water and you remembered I know how to swim. The silence grew thick between us. You've got to stop making this personal, he snapped. It was always personal, I said. You just never saw me as a person with anything to take. His fingers tapped the bouquet awkwardly like he'd forgotten he was holding them. I thought you might want a second chance, he muttered. A real one. I do, I said, but not yours, mine. I stood. He stayed seated for a beat too long, then slowly rose with a quiet sigh, tucking the bouquet awkwardly under one arm like a forgotten gift. Goodbye, Dad, I said without flinching. He paused in the doorway as if waiting for me to stop him. I didn't. When the door clicked shut, Lena peeked around the corner. Should I toss those? She asked, pointing at the flowers. No, I said, walking over. Leave them, let them wilt. By the end of the day, the lilies had already begun to curl at the edges. By the end of the week, Harold Wallace's reputation had begun to do the same. And for the first time in my life, I felt absolutely nothing about it. Not guilt, not fear, not longing. Just room, empty space. The kind people spend years begging for. I'd bought it with silence, and now I was finally learning how to fill it with my own voice. The collapse wasn't sudden. It wasn't a fiery fall or a headline-worthy implosion. No, Wallace Logistics bled quietly, like a slow leak behind a wall, rotting the foundation long before the surface cracked. Vendors hesitated. Partners whispered. Executives resigned to explore new opportunities. And every week, the stock dipped just a little lower, like a body slipping beneath water inch by inch. From my loft, I watched it all unfold. Lena would read the latest market commentary over breakfast. "They're calling it the loyalty vacuum," she said once. "Wallace can't hold on to anyone, not staff, not investors. Even long-timers are fleeing." I stirred my coffee. "It's not a vacuum," I said. "It's exposure." The moment they cut me loose, they cut their stability loose with me. And now, I was ready to claim what should have been mine all along. Through a network of proxies, friends of investors, partners of partners, I began assembling a bidding group. Names Harold wouldn't recognize. Entities with no direct tie to Granite metrics. On paper, I wasn't anywhere near the auction room. But in every phone call, every strategy session, every bidding threshold calculated to just under Wallace Logistics' estimated valuation, I was the voice behind the curtain. We waited. And when Wallace Logistics finally announced its intent to sell to restructure, adapt to market demands, and welcome new leadership investment, we struck. The auction wasn't public, not exactly. It happened behind closed boardroom doors in quiet negotiations and sealed envelopes. A desperate attempt to avoid the embarrassment of a company being swallowed by vultures. But I wasn't a vulture. I was the heir. And this wasn't scavenging. It was reclamation. The day of the final bid, I stood inside a glass-walled conference room, not at the Wallace Tower, but at the brokerage offices where the transaction would be formalized. My group filed in slowly. I remained in the background, silent, faceless. Across from us sat Harold Wallace. His hair was grayer now, his shoulders hunched. He still wore the navy blazer, but now it fit like armor he no longer believed in. He scanned the room, jaw tight. His bid was aggressive, predictable, emotional. An attempt to buy back the very thing he'd let rot from the inside out. But we were smarter, sharper, prepared. When the final envelope was opened and our number was read aloud, I didn't cheer. I didn't smirk. I didn't even exhale, because this wasn't the climax. It was the quiet before revelation. Harold looked around, stunned. "Who the hell is Apex Consolidated?" he demanded. No one answered. I watched from behind the mirrored glass, heart thudding, not from nerves, but from something colder, sharper, closure. Within 48 hours, the sale was finalized, ownership transferred. Wallace Logistics, after 3 decades under Harold's command, was no longer his, and no one knew who really owned it. Yet, Lena came into my office that night, a folder in one hand, a bottle of cheap champagne in the other. "You did it," she whispered. I stared out the window, watching the Denver skyline glitter like a city waking up after years of fog. "No," I said. "We're just getting started." Because the team didn't know yet. The executives, the staffers, the workers on the floor who still thought Harold Wallace was king. But the truth was about to walk back through those doors in heels and a tailored suit. And this time it wouldn't be to take orders. It would be to give them. The air in Wallace Logistics' lobby had changed. It used to smell like overbrewed coffee and corporate anxiety. Today, it held something sharper. Anticipation. Whispers had been spreading for weeks. A new buyer had taken over. No one knew who. The staff moved like shadows, curious, cautious, waiting for the mask to drop. I didn't call ahead. Didn't send an announcement. I walked through the revolving glass doors just after 9, wearing a charcoal gray suit tailored to precision and heels that echoed down the marble floor like a metronome marking a new era. People turned, double takes. Stares. Some recognized me from years ago when I was the quiet daughter in reception, the junior accountant in the back office. Others didn't know me at all. Perfect. I didn't nod, didn't explain. I walked straight to the elevator, pressed 12 for the executive floor, and waited. When the doors opened, silence fell. A dozen heads turned. A few stood. June Wallace was standing near the boardroom, a half-empty coffee cup in hand. Her mouth parted just slightly. Harold, sitting at the far end of the long table, looked up, brows furrowing in confusion, then disbelief. I stepped inside. The boardroom froze. There were murmurs at first. Then Harold stood. "What is this?" he barked. "Security, who let her?" But the VP of operations, a woman I'd once helped save $1 million in freight costs, stood up first. She didn't call security. She opened the seat at the head of the table. My seat. I placed a folder on the table, then calmly reached into my purse and pulled out the executive keycard. The new one, embossed with a single title, Chief Executive Officer. I slid it across the table. I own the majority share of Wallace Logistics, I said clearly. Effective today, I'm your CEO. Gasps. Someone dropped a pen. Someone else whispered my name like a prayer they hadn't said in years. Harold looked like he'd been punched in the gut. No, he breathed. That's not this can't. You sold your legacy, I said evenly. And you didn't ask who was buying. His hands gripped the table. You manipulated the board, hid behind shell investors, you betrayed. I followed the rules, I interrupted. The same rules you used to keep me boxed into silence. He turned to June. Did you know about this? She stared at me hard, cold, and said nothing. That was the moment I understood. June had never expected me to win. She hadn't feared it because she believed it wasn't possible. I've scheduled a company-wide meeting for noon, I told the board. There will be a transition plan, leadership evaluations, culture audits. Someone tried to clap. I stopped them with a glance. This isn't a celebration, I said. It's a correction. Harold stepped toward me. You think you've won? He hissed, low enough for only me to hear. You think a few titles and numbers make you strong? I met his gaze. You built a kingdom on silence, I said. I run mine on truth. He faltered, just for a second. The man who once towered over me at family dinners now stood eye level with the woman who'd rebuilt everything he tried to keep for himself. June finally spoke. So what now? You punish us? I looked at her, at the woman who always chose silence over me. No, I said, I replace you. And then I turned to the board. Let's begin. The projector came on. My first slide read only this: Wallace Logistics is no more. And beneath it, welcome to Wallace Analytics. The reshaping began that afternoon. Within hours of the announcement, my office was flooded with messages, some congratulatory, some hesitant, others laced with fear. People had grown used to a regime built on fear-based loyalty. Now they didn't know what to expect, which meant I could build something from scratch, and I did. I started with the executive audit. Quietly, deliberately. Department by department, I asked every VP one question. Who did you protect when things went wrong? Not profits, not procedures, people. Those who answered honestly stayed. Those who danced around their silence didn't. Harold's most loyal lieutenants, those who had stood by while I was sidelined, who'd parroted his orders without question, were released by the end of the week. I didn't fire them with cruelty. I did it with composure, transparency, and documentation. Because I wasn't just cleaning house. I was building one I could actually live in. The rebranding followed. Wallace Logistics became Wallace Analytics, a company no longer just about moving goods, but about moving smarter, fairer, faster. Our new slogan. Intelligence in motion. My face, not Harold's, appeared in our first relaunch video. And yes, I looked directly into the camera, not as his daughter, as the woman who'd earned this. On Friday, I called Harold into my office. Just him and me, behind glass walls and memories too heavy to carry. He stood across from my desk, arms crossed, defiant as ever, but quieter now. The storm had passed. He'd lost the company, and for once I think he knew it wasn't coming back. You said once, I began, that I was good with numbers and nothing more. He looked away, jaw tight. I believed that for a long time, I continued. So I made peace with the silence. I learned to speak in spreadsheets, strategy, projections. But now, I speak in policy, culture, leadership. He didn't respond, so I stood, walked around the desk, and looked him in the eyes. You built a kingdom on silence, I said. Now it runs on truth. His mouth parted, maybe to apologize, maybe to protest, but I didn't give him the chance. This meeting is just a courtesy, I said. Your final paperwork's on the way. We'll honor your pension, and your legacy, such as it is, will remain archived. But this company will never be what it was under you. He stared at me like I'd become someone else. I hadn't. I just stopped hiding. He left without a word. And for the first time, I didn't watch him go. That night, I stood alone in the boardroom, lights dimmed, watching Denver flicker beyond the windows. The skyline looked different now. Not because the buildings had changed, because I had. Years passed. The building still stood, taller now, sleeker. Wallace Analytics had grown beyond freight and logistics. We became a data intelligence powerhouse. Clean algorithms, ethical transparency, and most importantly, voices at every level. I stepped away after 5 years. Not because I had to, because I was finally full. I'd done what I came to do, rewrote the story from the inside out. Now on Tuesdays and Thursdays, I stand in front of a different kind of room. A lecture hall at the University of Colorado, flooded with sunlight and notebooks. Eager faces, some confident, some still learning the weight of their own opinions. The course. Business ethics and strategic accountability. But I call it something else. Real-world chess. I wear jeans and soft sweaters now. No suits. No heels that echo down sterile halls. Just the sound of my voice and 30 students scribbling as fast as they can. Some weeks we unpack corporate fraud. Others we examine silent complicity. And sometimes, when they ask me to, or when the moment calls for it, I tell them a story. About a girl born into a fortress. Taught to be grateful for the gate while others roamed freely. A girl who gave away her genius like charity until one day she built something no one could steal. I don't tell them it's my story, not at first, but they figure it out. The questions come slowly, tentatively. Was it really your father's company? Did he ever apologize? Was it worth it? I smile every time. Yes, no, and absolutely. One student, Tanya, once asked, "What was the turning point?" I paused, then said, "When I stopped needing to be chosen." The room went silent. They always go silent after that. And in the back row, there's always someone who tears up without realizing it. Not because of the drama, but because they recognize themselves in the beginning, before the twist, before the steal, before the rising. My office on campus has 2 degrees on the wall, a tiny plant I always forget to water, and a small photo of me and Lena, arms around each other outside the old loft. Under it is a sticky note that just says, "Truth outlives everything." June still sends birthday cards, no return address, no signature, just 2 lines each year. "Hope you're well, keep going." I don't hate her, I understand her. She lived in Harold's shadow so long she forgot what sunlight felt like. I broke the chain for both of us even if she never wanted it broken. Sometimes, late at night, I reread old memos from my granite metrics days. Ideas scribbled on diner napkins. Reports that saved companies. Strategies that once earned other men applause under my name. Now they belong to history, to me, to her, the girl who wasn't heard until she owned the room. And maybe you're her too. If you are, listen carefully. Not to what they say about you, not to what they steal, but to that voice inside that's been whispering all along, you don't need permission to rise. You just need the courage to start.